I almost died. As soon as the words left my mouth, I almost died from fear that they're about to tear me to pieces. And so
There's no one out there who's like the classic cartoon supervillain who's thinking, I'm just going to do evil shit all day.
doing is not as efficient or not working necessarily, and then have some kind of evidence to back up that doing it your way works.
The Wolf of Wall Street moment where he's telling me this pen.
If you're listening, you should do that when you're arguing with your partner. I'm not, but all I'm saying is it will work.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, episode 9. This is the challenges of giving feedback. We're Disrupt Leaders once again. And Bill, what are you excited to talk about today?
Mate, feedback is one of my favorite topics in the workplace. I'm a big believer in feedback in all contexts, giving it, receiving it. And so I'm really looking forward to getting into the nitty gritty of some of those like more challenging situations and generally just talking about creating a culture of feedback in general. What about yourself?
Love the fact that you just said now is a culture of feedback's really big. We spoke about it off camera. And I think a lot of people would get nervous about giving feedback in the first place. And this is why we started this episode. We've seen tons of content out there where people are just scared of giving feedback. But it's all about putting in some groundwork to make sure that feedback's received in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Bill, what's the first challenge do you reckon most people face when they try to give feedback?
Yeah, a really good one, because I think there's obviously quite a few challenges. I think one of the more common ones is giving feedback to someone that is probably not going to like it. Liking feedback and receiving feedback, not everybody does. I think I've spoken about this before. The first time I ever in a one-on-one asked someone to give me feedback, I almost died. As soon as the words left my mouth, I almost died from fear that they're about to tear me to pieces. And so no one really likes receiving feedback. But there are times as a leader where you have someone and you'll find them doing something, you'll see them doing something, and you know that they're not going to want to change that behavior. It's going to be a real challenge to have that conversation and embrace that conversation. It can be quite difficult. So my question to you, Jules, is if you're in that situation, how do you approach that? If you've been hustling away, you found something, you're like, oh God, I've got to tell Steve this. Steve's not going to like it. What do you do?
Yeah. Goddamn, Steve. 100%. You definitely have, I think almost in every team, you're almost guaranteed to have at least one person who probably doesn't like feedback, or at least the way you deliver feedback. And that's the key.
Yes.
I think it's just about understanding how they like feedback delivered. Now, it's not to say that you want to really play to everything people want. Like you can get to a very dangerous game if you do that. Like every time, if that person says, I like feedback sent in the mail 5 business days before, you can't really adhere to that. But if they say, for example, I like to listen to myself first. So I like to observe myself and understand myself first, or I like you to bring in some examples, or I like you to sit with me side by side whilst I'm doing the thing that you're giving me feedback on. And that's how I like feedback. You want to play to those a little bit at least. And that way you're communicating on their level. I was speaking to you before, Bill, that learning styles is a lot of people kind of stick to learning styles around this person's auditory, or they like to read through things, etc. I'm not a huge believer in that, but I think it's about understanding what learning style fits the situation though. Right. So I'm a big believer that like kind of practice makes perfect as well. So the feedback might be that you get them to practice and then they'll understand and reflect on how they sound. And then you give them the feedback. Oh, so talk me through that. What do you think you could change? If you could change anything at all, those kinds of really effective questions can get them to start reflecting and they give themselves the feedback. That's always the most powerful.
Yeah, I think you bang on. I really like that there. And one thing that you touched on a little bit that I really liked is tailoring the feedback to the person you're talking to. I think it's the most important thing. I think one of the worst things that leaders can do is treat everybody like they're the same and then expect it to go well for everybody. You might have a way of delivering feedback that works really well for 9 out of your 10 people on your team, but if it's not working for that 10th person, that's actually not their problem. It's your problem. It's your responsibility. I say this a lot. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to address, right, as a leader and change. So the question is, how do you know how everyone likes feedback, right? Like, how do you know what you're doing? How do you know how to tell it to people? And I think this is something that's like really, it's so underrated. Just ask. Like it is literally that easy. Just ask your people how they like feedback. This isn't some kind of like a puzzle we have to solve. You can literally just ask the people. It's something that I'm a big believer on. So when I join a new team, when I start a new team, I always start very first session by making sure that they know I love feedback. I will give you lots of feedback. I want you to give me lots of feedback. That's how I can lead you better. It's how I can continue to grow. I get really frustrated if I have a manager that doesn't give me feedback, and I'm always looking for it. Like, I need that pat on the head sometimes. I need that reassurance. And so the same for my people, right? Like, I've got a couple of people in my team that need that pat on the head, that need to be told that you're doing a good job. I've got a couple of people that don't. They're cold killers and they know it, and they don't want that much attention. They think it's cringe or whatever. And so it is, for me, that simple. Just ask your people, how do they like to be led? What do you like in terms of feedback? Now, am I saying that you're going to have to completely change your style and completely be a completely different human being? No. But I think it's always good just to have an idea of what people like. And then you have an idea of what you can skirt around, an idea how you can address it, right? And I think when you've got someone that is challenging in terms of the feedback that you have to give, maybe they're a bit of a problem child, you've been having heaps and heaps of issues with them. I think some of it is just trial and error as well. Right? If you tried something last time and it went down like a lead balloon, it's not great. Try something different this time. Try approaching it in a different way. Do something like you just said. Play the call and let them listen to it first. Only issue with that, I don't know if you've ever done that, Jules, where you've played a call for someone that's obviously terrible, and then they're like, no, I think it was great.
Yeah, I was the bee's knees. I was the best that I've ever heard on the phones there. That was great. Yeah, okay. We've all got that. We've all got that one delusional person in the business for sure.
And it's like, it was fine. And it wasn't. Like, that was maybe the worst call I've ever heard. I'm pretty sure that was illegal in 3 states in America. Like, it's one of those things. But no, I think it's one of those things I think you just have to, like, really tell to the person, and I think just try different things. Don't be afraid to try.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are just not going to feedback you've got to give. You have to give it.
Yeah.
So, are you going to say?
No, I was going to say that I think you just identify what's the root of their dislike of feedback.
Yeah,
some people have just had managers or leaders in the past that probably have led them astray. I had a person over the last 6 or 7 months was perceived as being averse to feedback in the business, and it's just that the leader that he had in the past gave him feedback on a lot of things. So he was saying the other day that every time he went to a coaching session, he was fearful of it. Like, he felt that, like, this one-on-one is going to just be a whole session about being berated for every single thing that he's done wrong. So he was just not looking forward to it. But what he found refreshing is that the way I kind of work is, and Bill, you and I both kind of work in a similar way, is one thing at a time. Let's focus on one thing, master it, move on. And he found that really refreshing. So his dislike with feedback was that, he's waiting for the undershoe to drop. And if you're constantly waiting for the undershoe to drop as an individual, you are not listening to every undershoe that's dropping before it, right? Like, you're just waiting for this going, when's the butt coming and coming? And so you want to be really understanding of maybe their past experiences are really coloring the feedback has got nothing to do with you. And so it's just understanding that, going, okay, maybe a question that you can ask, or to Bill's point around asking feedback around how do you want feedback to be approached, is asking them, what feedback have you hated in the past? Maybe that's the way you approach it. Because sometimes when you ask the question, how would you like feedback? People look at you with kind of deer in headlights again. Go, okay, what have you hated in the past when you've received feedback? And they might say, I don't like multiple things to work on, etc. And you can use that to guide your coaching.
Yeah. And I think you touched on some really good points there as well. You just be careful when giving feedback, especially if you've got someone that does have a lot of things to work on. You can't just be smashing someone all the time. People do need to be picked up. When they do make an improvement on something, even if it's not all the way to where the goal is, you still have to give them that pat on the head, even though there's more challenging people. Because some people they just feel like they're getting cooked on all the time, like just getting smashed. And so I think it's really important. It's something I do a lot. Whenever I do live monitoring with my people, I always try to get them to focus on what they did well as well as what they're not doing well. And I think it's really important to call out the positives. I think you had a really great tone of voice. I think this sounded great. How do you feel this part was, though? I will say this, though. I hate the compliment sandwich. The whole idea that they used to, so you give them a compliment and then you tell them the negative and you give them a compliment. It's so played out. Everyone's aware of what you're doing. And I feel like it just doesn't work. So I'm not saying to do that, but I do think you have to make time to call out the positives as well. Because otherwise people will just get so wrapped up in the negatives that all they'll see is the negatives. And then literally, like you just said, your session starts to become something they don't enjoy. And I want people to enjoy coaching with me. I want people to come into that session being like, awesome, 30 minutes, my leader. I'm going to get something out of this. I'm going to leave here with more skills than I went in. It's what I would look for from my leader. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you need to make coaching seem like. And if you do have someone right now in your teams that doesn't like feedback, doesn't like the way that you deliver feedback, I think that's probably a thing for you to look at. Again, I'm not saying it's your fault, but it probably is your responsibility to look at that and go, okay, what have I been doing? What's been working? What's not been working? What have they not been receptive to? What have they been receptive to? And then have that conversation with them and just be really open, honest, and upfront. I think sometimes as leaders, we get too concerned. We can't show our vulnerabilities. We can't show that we also don't have all the answers, especially when it comes to like coaching and stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with sitting in a session with your person and just being like, look, obviously this is not quite working. What can I do to support you best? What do you need from me to get where you want to get to? And just have that open conversation, really open that dialogue and get them to tell you. It will make all the difference.
I agree completely. I talk about showing vulnerability. That's another way as well. If you've got a person that's not liking the feedback, it could be that you turn the tables a little bit. I sometimes go, hey, if you're a leader and you've got a person that's demonstrating X, Y, Z, how would you approach that conversation? And sometimes inadvertently
Great question,
they give you, they inadvertently they give you the answer to how you can approach them. And they go, now that you've said that, probably don't do it in the same session. Wait till the next session. So it's not as obvious. It's a really good question to ask them because it gets them into their mindset. And also it gets them thinking about you in a lot of ways. Like you think about, okay, this person's really trying. Like they're really trying a different angle, different ways to get through to me. And that alone can start to change some of that behaviors and soften their kind of thoughts of you in general.
Yeah. If you're putting effort in to show them, if they can see that you're really trying to help them, maybe they've had a previous leader that didn't, and then they finally, might take a little while to break those walls down, but I think you bang on, Jules. I think if you really put that effort in, they can see that you genuinely care about them, they will start to be more receptive to feedback just because they don't want to disappoint you and they know that you're trying to them, so they want to try for you.
And the last thing on that one about the compliment sandwich, I do agree with you. I think it can be overdone completely. I think go for a constructive sandwich rather than a compliment sandwich. I think so. And maybe ask them what they think they did well. And hopefully they give you, hopefully you're not dealing with that delusional person we spoke about before. And they're saying, everything I do, Bill, is amazing. Why do you ask?
Walk on water, actually.
Actually
walk on water. It's fine.
Yeah, they've called me, the board of directors have called me and they're going to make me CEO because that's how good I am. But yeah, so hopefully they pick out something themselves. Or you can also ask them questions like that are outside of work and stuff like that to build some positivity. You can be like, okay, what did you really enjoy about this week? And they might say, I like that team meeting or something like that. And that still can get that positivity going without having to talk about their work itself. It also depends on how long you've been coaching this person as well. I think if it's your first couple of coaching sessions, the compliment sandwich can work really well. But if your compliment sandwich 10 coaching sessions in, they're gonna know what you're doing. So stop doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. You want to get into things pretty quickly because you set the agenda really quickly at the start of the one-on-one coaching session going, how was your day? All that kind of stuff. What are you looking forward to the weekend? That kind of stuff. And they go, okay, these are the things I've observed. What do you think about that, etc. Because they're going to appreciate that a lot more, especially if they're built a rapport with you.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. 100% agree. Got a bit of a stretch question for you, Jules, off the back of this one. Something that I know a lot of new leaders struggle with. What about if you're a leader, the person that you need to give feedback to may or may not be receptive, you don't know, but maybe they're more senior to you. Maybe they've been at the business a lot longer than you. Maybe they're a lot older than you. They've been in the industry a lot longer than you. I was chatting to one of my good friends yesterday, and he used to work for a major bank, and he's quite young. He's 26, and he got moved in as a branch manager. But one of the people who were in his branch used to be a branch manager elsewhere, and she just stepped down into a clerk role just to be a bit more casual. She didn't want to have to have that responsibility. But she was really not receptive to feedback because he was so much younger, and she definitely felt that threatened from him. So it is quite a common scenario. How do you approach that? What do you do if you're in that? And I'm not saying you're an old man now, Jules. It's probably not going to happen anymore. No offense. I'm not kicking myself either. But for the listeners out there, what would you do if you're in their shoes?
No, 100%. I think now I'm less and less finding that I'm the young man in most situations. I can tell you that much for sure. My body's definitely telling me that I'm not the young man in most situations.
My lower back has been telling me all morning, bro. Take that for free.
Yeah, so let me harken back through the years and dealing with older people. But I think in general, this is a trick for dealing with anyone, not only senior people, but making them feel heard when they're talking to you is the first thing. Like when they tell you something, they're thinking this is the best light in the world. There's no one out there who's like the classic cartoon supervillain who's thinking, I'm just going to do evil shit all day. You know what I mean? There's no one who's thinking that or thinking, oh, I want to make Bill's day really bad here. So when they're telling you something, they're probably thinking they're doing it for the benefit of themselves and everyone else in the business. So you want to really take in whatever they're telling you. So a
Yeah.
part of feedback is also being able to take feedback.
Yes.
So when they're telling you whatever they're telling you, you go, okay, you want to try and connect with something within what they're saying that you
Yeah.
might agree with at some level, right? You might not agree with everything they're telling you. They might be telling you some whack stuff and you're like, that's whack. But is there something within that stuff that you can connect with and go, okay, I appreciate where you're coming from. This part of what you're saying makes sense. Now, can I talk to you about what I've observed here, though? It's that kind of, I go, I appreciate what you're saying, and then pivot to what I want to show them and go in that direction.
Yeah.
It's also pumping them up a little bit when you first start, the first interaction you have with this more senior person, go, hey, I'm quite junior in the business. You and I have to do this quite a bit, Bill, because we're not the process experts in anything. So listen, I don't know much about processes in this company, or I don't know this certain thing, but I believe you've been here for so long and everything. I'll be really leaning on you over the
I was
next
going to
couple of
say it.
months to
So good.
understand a lot of things. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to teach this person a few things. But whilst
Correct.
they're teaching you, you can teach them as well.
People like to feel valued, I think. And I think when someone comes in, their fear is you're going to come in as some young upstart and start mouthing off and telling them how to live their life and blah, blah, blah. But if you go in with the opposite and you actually be really humble and you come in with that, I think you clearly know what you're doing. I've had a chat to Phil, senior manager, whoever he is, just make him a name. I've had a chat to senior manager. He says that you're really good at these things. So I'm really looking forward to learning that from you and seeing how we can grow together, blah, blah, blah. I think that makes such a massive difference going in from that other tact and showing them you're not there to tell them like how to live their life and do the basics and stuff like that. I think is really important. Obviously, sometimes, like you say, though, they do say it works. Or like they'll have a thing that they're doing that you're like, oh, we do that because you've been doing that for ages, not because it's the best way to do it. And I think sometimes approaching those things can be a bit of a challenge. One of the things in these kind of situations I'm really big on is I think it's really important to have receipts. You know what I mean? Have proof that things that look like the thing that they're doing is not as efficient or not working necessarily. And then have some kind of evidence to back up that doing it your way works. Whether that's another consultant is doing it and it's working, or whether just asking them to give it a go for you. And look, I think maybe I'm a big one of this. I use the word we a lot in training. It's never you, it's never I, it's always we. We need to work on our AHT. We need to work on this. I'm a big on that. And actually to circle to the whole point, when it comes to managing difficult people, providing feedback in general, I always start my sessions by saying that it's not this needs to improve and it needs to improve now, but it's not something that you need to work on. It's something we need to work on. And you and I are going to sit down today in this session and we're going to figure out how to get this sorted. I do that in a lot of in the more challenging conversations. It's something that I find works really well because it lets them know that I'm not there trying to push them out of the business or performance management. I'm there to help them. Much to your point from earlier, it makes them know they've got that support. And so I think when you've got the more senior consultants, okay, what can we do to try this? What suggestions do we have? And then spitball a few ideas, and they might give you a couple ideas, but then you put you Trojan horse them effectively. You slip your Trojan horse in of your idea. These 4 ideas, which one do you think is the best? And then sometimes, obviously, if yours just makes sense, you can just ask them to try it for you. And I think if they're as experienced as they are and as good as they are, they should be willing to try, I think. If you're not telling them that they have to change, you're not telling them that they have to do this, you have to do that. You're just like, look, I'd really appreciate if you give this a go. Let's just try it for a couple of days, see how it works. And then inevitably it works. What do you think?
Yeah. Us, Brad Pitt being in the scenes got to help, right? With the,
100%.
I'm talking about
100%.
Troy.
Troy, what a film.
Dude,
Troy,
yeah,
what
I
a
know,
film.
great film.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But no,
I was waiting to get that reference out, by the way. The whole moment you said Trojan horse.
There will be a picture of Brad Pitt somewhere in this video. Maybe more than once.
Yeah, correct.
But I do, honestly, I do think, and I've gone a bit off a bit in a tangent, but we, as a concept, like saying we, is something that really works for me in a lot of sessions. You can't, again, it's not for everyone. It's not for every session. But in those more difficult conversations with those more challenging people, and especially with your more senior people who've been a bit longer than you, I find the team are really struggling with AHT at the moment. What can we do? You're really experienced. I'd really like to lean on you. What do you think we can do? I do that sort of stuff a lot. And maybe the rest of the team are not struggling. Maybe they're one of the worst. But I make it seem that it's a wider problem and they're going to help me with the problem through their experience.
100%.
And that creating that buy-in to the project, to your team, is what's going to help them support you a little bit more and not look down on you as much, in my opinion.
Yeah, the other alternative to the we thing, I do something similar as well. I asked them, hey, are you willing to do an experiment with me? Right?
Like
are you willing to do an experiment with me over the next couple of days? Let's give it a go. If you fall on our face, I'm there to pick you up. Or you can say, hey, Julian, what you said there, absolutely yes. I hated it. And that's okay. I'll wait for you to call me in 2 days' time and tell me that this experiment did not work out. But I'm there. So essentially, sometimes they'll just be like, I'll do it so I can prove Julian wrong because I think he's talking BS. And they'll do it. And they realize, wait a minute, Julian's been right all along because always I am.
I thought I was wrong
But
once, actually. I thought I was wrong. I was just mistaken. I'm
yeah,
never wrong.
that was just that was just my imposter personality. But
Yeah.
so like when I do that, they go, yeah, okay, like I'll do it. Like, and they give it a go and they realize it works for them and your battle is won, you move on. But yeah, same thing. I go, do you want to do experiment? Becoming a receipt's really good as well. I also say, hey, there's some other senior people in the business I've done this with, and it's worked out fantastically well for them. It's that evidence-based conversation we spoke about when we did the Diary of the CEO, right? Like you need to give people enough evidence to change their point of view. You can't just be like, hey, I think my way is the best, most fantastic way. Just do it. But give them some evidence or give them at least anecdotes from times you've done it before.
It's always important. It's more important with those people that are more senior, right? It is. I think having that evidence is always important, but more senior people have been doing things their way for ages are not just going to change their behavior because you're the leader. And I don't think you should expect them to either. I don't think just because I'm the leader that what I say, if I say jump, you should always care high. That's not what a good leader is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that makes it very difficult with some senior people as well. When in terms of senior, in terms of tenure in the business, not senior in terms of management, is that they've been through a few cycles of leaders sometimes. And what they're thinking in their heads, and I've heard them say this directly to me, is that they see it as weathering a storm, right? So this is a new manager, a new style. And we've seen it, right? Businesses just change the flip of the hat just because there's a new manager in the business and they decide this is what's important. And there's some of these senior people that go, oh, mate, I've been here for 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and I've seen through a few managers and you'll be gone, I'll still be here, right? Now, the thing with those kinds of people, what I really want to speak to them is, you are still here. I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a good thing that you're still here. I personally think that weathering the storm has maybe served you in terms of giving you a job and gives you salary, but is this job still giving you satisfaction? I could probably bet, unless you're doing some, really fantastic job out there, most people in corporate world don't get much fulfillment out of their jobs if they've been there for 5 to 10 years plus, right? No, it's not the day and age we live in. So it's about having that conversation and go, hey, what do you get out of this job? Is this something that gives you satisfaction? And maybe weathering the storm hasn't really benefited you so far, but getting them to really see that. There may be other people in the business who are also been there for 5 years, but they're now senior management level or whatever the case is. What do you think they've done differently to you? And maybe getting them to see a different point of view.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think you do get those people that feel like they're just like, well, you just got to survive through the next thing. It is something I do with those people a little bit is I just get them on to look at the moment. This is, if we've got a new senior leader change, let's say, new boss comes in and they're mandating that this thing is now super, super important. And the person's like, if I just grind through this, it will be gone away in 6 months or 2 months, whatever. They're probably not wrong. Usually businesses sometimes do, especially big businesses, change their focus pretty regularly. And so I think for me, I'm just be pretty candid around to those people and just be like, look, it's not like it is the focus at the minute. So let's just do it well enough that we get our pat on the head. We don't show up on any naughty lists, and then you look good, I look good. Because those kind of things do get noticed. And I think that a lot of people, when they are the weathering the storm types, don't realize that everyone knows you're just weathering the storm. Everyone knows that you're just waiting for it to pass. Whereas if you at least, I'm not saying be the best at it, but if you at least do it enough to not show up on any naughty lists, not to show up on any, show that you're like putting the effort in. Yeah. Get that pat on the head, then we can move on.
Yeah, you don't have to be the number one at that thing.
Yeah, correct.
You just have to be enough that they know, okay, if you've got any changes, things that are coming up, we can rely on this person for a certain level of output. Yes. And then we spoke about before in our previous podcast episode around managers or senior leaders like to work with people they know how they're going to react and how they're going to do certain things at all times. Yeah,
and if you're one of those performers, if you've been as a consultant for 10 plus years, you are probably pretty consistent. You're probably not aiming to shoot the lights out month in, month out like some of the people are. I think that's probably the focus, right? If you know that the new change is coming, whether you agree with the change or not, just be consistent. Just take it under your wing. Just get a little bit done. Do enough that you show up that you've embedded that change. And I think that'll go a long way, I think, for a lot of people, like with those kind of consultants. And I think sometimes as managers, a lot of managers will be like, no, they have to just start doing it 110%. They have to live, eat, and breathe it. And so, but that's not that person. That's not that person's mindset. And it's something I spoke about in a previous episode. I really struggled with that when I was a new leader. because I've always been
Mm.
at the top. I take a lot of pride in being good at my job, whether I care about the job or not. Like even when I was working in retail, like I cared about doing a good job. Like I like that satisfaction, but not everyone's like that. And so it's really foreign for me when I went in and people didn't want to be a high performer. They just wanted to do their job and get paid and leave. It's really hard for me to get into that mindset, but there are people that like that, and that's fine, right? You know what I mean? If they're happy with it, absolutely 100% fine. But I think it's just making sure that their happiness and the business is aligned enough. If they don't want to do any of the things, the business want them to do all of the things. How about we do half of the things and everybody's kind of happy? You know?
Correct. Yeah, correct. If his paycheck, well, then that's on the challenging conversation or feedback as a leader is dealing with people that probably are checked out a little bit or don't really care. And that's one thing. It's quite difficult. We've spoken about before. You'd rather have highly motivated people that want to progress
Yeah,
than just have people that are in for a paycheck. But you still have those people and you have to deal with those people. And it's about, as Bill said, making sure that they understand what's the minimum they need to do to not rock the boat too much. So if they
right.
like that PAYG, their money coming in every fortnight, every month, fantastic. That's all. Like people have different goals, and you might have some other things that you're doing in life, and that's bringing you more fulfillment. That's all good. What do you need to do minimum right now to make sure that you're not on any naughty list? Make sure that senior management aren't targeting you to get rid of you or whatever the case is. I think that's important when you're having those conversations with them.
On this, right? I was thinking about this conversation we've just been having around these kind of performers that are you missed a consistent turn up, do their job, get paid, go homes. It very much falls into what we were actually saying at the start. Now I think about it, we've actually circled around without doing it on purpose, because ultimately it comes down to just knowing the person, responding to them and listening to them and listening to what they're interested in, listening to what they care about and managing them according to that. Much with a high performer, you're not going to have this conversation with a high performer and say, hey, just do enough, that should not rock the boat. And I think it's very much just knowing your people and playing to your people. And I think that's the real element of giving feedback that's really important, is knowing the person you're giving the feedback to. And if you don't know, get to know. Ask questions. Now, Jules, a little bit of a segue related. Obviously, we've spoken about senior people in terms of tenure and stuff like that. This is something we've spoken a little about previously. Providing feedback to higher ups can be challenging. Not everybody likes to do it. Some people are really fearful of it. I probably do it too much. But the one thing that triggers me is when I'll be telling some of my colleagues, and I've had this in almost every role I've ever been in, will be just the colleagues, no senior managers, and everyone will be bitching about some new process change, whatever. And then we'll get in the meeting and the boss, so any feedback on the change? And no one will say anything. It fuels me, because I'm like, you all have opinions on it. But if it's only me that's willing to voice his opinions, they're just like, oh, it's just still kicking off again. You know what I mean? And so you all feel this way. Say what you feel. But that's part of that. It's a challenge for some people, passing that feedback on managing up. So my question to you, what are your go-to bullet points? If you rapid fire, what do you do to provide feedback up the chain?
I think we go back to, you got to have receipts. I think with a lot of senior managers, they're usually time poor. And so you don't want to waffle in there going, I feel about this or whatever. You want to come in with real evidence around, if you really want to create space for them to see your point of view, you want to come in with receipts and go, this is what I've seen, this is what I've observed, these are the numbers, and this is what I think this is the direction we need to go in, etc. I know this is the direction to go in, etc.
Yeah.
And I think also just remember they're human beings at the end of the day. So you don't need to, I think people are really fearful of these people, but they've also got human emotions, right? They're not robots that are just telling you stuff. They might seem like it sometimes, but it's also important to go, yeah, I appreciate they're bringing out this change. Again, we could go to this story about being a supervillain, right? They're not thinking, how could I make everyone's life just miserable? Hopefully they're not thinking that. So you want to just, again, go to them, go, talk me through what you think the benefits are for me as an individual, or for my team, or for my colleagues, for rolling out this change. And then you go, okay, that's a really interesting perspective. This is what I think, right? Maybe we change this slightly here. And it's not about discounting their change altogether, because people might go, no, I hate everything about that, that's shit. But it's about going, okay, how can we change that a little bit to suit everyone a little bit more, or to suit me a little bit more? And the worst case scenario, they say no. And then you can make that decision from there. But I think
then you get to say, I told you, when it doesn't go well. If you
correct,
suggest, hey, I don't think this is going to work, this is why I don't think this is going to work. And they're like, no, we're doing it our way. And then it doesn't work. Bro, I don't even have to say I told you so. I'm gonna, because that's who I am as a human being. But yeah, the sweetest. What was it that the Diary CEO said? Because he said something, you touched on a point, because I think that the ultimate point is, When you need to give
Never
feedback, if they're
disagree.
suggesting something for you, not to start with a no. I don't remember the specific. He had a catchphrase for it. The chapter was titled. I don't remember
Never,
what it
yeah,
is.
it's just yeah, never disagree.
That's the one.
Yeah,
And I think that's really
yeah.
important. I think if you do disagree, don't start with this fucking sucks. This is shit. Blah, 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 blah. Instead, I think it's always, and we've said this, I
Yeah,
think I've said it 6
yeah.
podcasts in a row at this point. Be curious, not judgmental. Ask a ton of questions. What's the purpose? Why are we doing this? Why is this the reason we're doing it? I just want to know. I want to know so I can get behind it. It's not I want to know because I want to disagree with it. I want to know so I can believe in the vision and push the vision to where it's meant to be. So I think once you've got a lot of information, it makes it easier to provide relevant receipts and be like, okay, I can see what you're trying to achieve. This is what we're trying to achieve. Why are we not going about it this way? It'd be more efficient. And then you can start to offer counter suggestions. And I think it's really important to always be constructive. If you just don't like something, saying, no, this sucks. And okay, well, what are we going to do about it? Something needs to be done about it.
Yeah.
It's either we do this or we do nothing, and we need to not do nothing. And I think that's something that people fall in the trap of when managing up. So I think for those people that are out there now, you're a bit nervous to talk to your boss, you're a bit nervous to pass that feedback up the chain. One, that's if you're like really nervous, that's a problem in itself, and you probably should look at addressing that as well. But I think if it's one of those things you're like, how do I even bring this up? I think if you're going to take one thing away from this entire thing, it is that exactly there. Don't start with saying no. Start by being curious, ask a ton of questions, and then offer a counter suggestion or just offer some thoughts. I think if you're really opposed to something, and this is something I learned in a previous role, sometimes I think it's better to take it offline as well. I think if the change gets rolled out in front of a group and you have personal issues with it, I think sometimes it's better just to be like, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Pull the manager aside and be like, hey, look, I just want you to know I'm really concerned about this. And then like pass that feedback on privately. Especially if it's rolled out in a really broad setting. If you're in a meeting where they've pulled like your entire department in, I'm in there, you're in there, all my people are in there, I'm probably not voicing any feedback in that meeting at all. Even if I think the thing is terrible, I'm not going to say a word in that session. You know?
No, yeah, I agree. Agree. Yeah. The optics of that person that does that in that room is never good. I got to tell you right now, if you're in a room of 30 senior leadership across the board, and you're the person going, yeah, I hate that. Or like straight away, they just arc up for most things they say. We all have those people in companies. And what is your perception of that person? Truly think about at that moment, what do you think of that person? Regardless of whether you agree with them or disagree with them, you probably don't think that person's going to go very far because it's just not a nice thing to do. I think what I love about what you said before, Bill, is you almost want to do the take it offline and do the Wolf of Wall Street moment where you sell me this pen. But in this case, you want to ask your senior leader, sell me the vision, right? Yeah, correct. It's, hey, I really want to be a part of this company. I really want to be a part of this change. I'm having trouble connecting the dots here. Can you sell me the vision? And if they truly believe in it and they truly think this is in your best interest, they will have no problem convincing you, right?
I will say this on this subject related. I don't think that you should counter your points in the meeting. I do think you should feel comfortable to speak up and ask questions in the group setting, though, because if there's questions you've thought of, chances are everyone else has thought of the questions. I think coming in and be like, oh, this sucks, so I think we should be doing this, blah, blah, blah. Terrible. That person's not going anywhere. But someone is just like, hey, ask a couple of questions. How's this going to work? How's that going to work? But sometimes it's funny when you know the suggestion's not good, you don't have to say that it's not good. If you ask a couple questions and it all falls apart, you don't need to tell anyone it's not good because you can prove it without going there. There's plenty of examples of that, like I think of from recent stream work where people are making suggestions across the line and they just don't quite click. And yeah, I think I learned from you actually, just ask a lot of questions, just pick it apart. And sometimes if the presenter starts to get frustrated, you're probably doing a good job.
Yeah. It's funny because you talk about that because going on a slightly different tangent in a slightly different context. So at work in the office, I'm a sarcastic person. That's my kind of sense of humor. So when sometimes someone tells me something that I go, what? That makes no sense. I ask them a question and they give themselves crap. And then the guy, Jules, that was really mean. I was like, I didn't say anything. I just asked you a question and you gave yourself crap just then. Oh, okay. Tell me, how does that make sense? And then actually, I don't make any sense at all. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. I don't know where you went with that. But 100%, if the person, as I said before, they don't have conviction with what they think their vision is, or they haven't thought of everything, it becomes pretty evident if you ask a few questions and dive into the detail. Yeah, you don't want to be the person that goes, I hate this. You do want to speak up in a question format, a curiosity format, when you're in those
You
meetings.
sound positive as well. Like, I really like what you're trying to achieve. I think if we can really improve this area of the business, that's going to be great. I just have a couple of questions around how this aspect is going to work, though. Right, I'm a believer. I believe in the vision, but a couple of questions for you. I just don't quite get this. And then I think that's the way to approach it, because I think you need to come across as not negative. If you come across as being negative to the idea, they'll discount your opinion anyway. Usually, some people get a
Less
bit
likely
too
to be
married to their
honest as well.
suggestions.
Yeah, correct. And they're less likely to be honest as well. I think you want them to be honest with whatever response they give you, rather than a real pre-prepared response or a bit of a fob off response. You want that kind of honesty coming through. So yeah, 100%. That's a really good tip.
Easy on. For one, the last major topic for today, probably in my opinion, it was something that I struggled with the most when I was a new leader. Even to this day, I think every leader will a little bit. Giving feedback when you are feeling a bit emotional. And I'm not talking about like you're having a rough day and you just want to get into bed and cry and then you've got to give feedback. I'm talking like someone does something and it really annoys you and you want to rip that person's head off in that meeting, or that kind of thing, like providing feedback in those kind of situations. I've mentioned this before. There was one time as a leader, we were really working on a stat as a team. I came in, I saw we were terrible, and I'm like in the Slack chat. I was a really new leader and I'm like, I'm disgusting, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out there was like some error with the data. And so we weren't that bad. And it was definitely not my people's fault. But still, like, I've already ripped everyone's head off. And after I calmed down, I was like, oh, that was not my finest moment as a leader. You know what I mean? And I think it can be really challenging when you're heated in that situation. So my question to you, young Julian, what do you do in that situation? Someone's really done something, pissed you off. You're in a one-on-one, they've just said something, in a huddle, they've said something, and you're raging. What do you do?
Yeah, talk about being a cold killer from the start. This is something I've always understood innately in terms of work anyway. I told you before, I think I use up all my patience at work. So I think, unfortunately for the people in my personal life, I probably don't have as long a fuse as I do at work. But what I do usually is mentally, I just give myself a pause. If they tell me something and it just creates a knee-jerk reaction in me where I go, oh, I hate that. Oh, I do not agree with this whatsoever. I tend to just reflect on that for about 10 seconds. It might not even be perceptible in the conversation because I've just done it for so long. It's just become a part of how I talk and interact with people. But if you tell me something and I'm not in agreement with, I will take a 10-second break. And in that time, I'm planning, how do I respond or what question do I ask? So I think take a bit of a step back from the conversation is really important in all emotional situations. I think whether that's in your personal life or in leadership or, just a colleague to colleague conversation, someone tells you something that's really ticking you off. I personally just step back a little bit, really think about, okay, what have they just told me? What do I want to really communicate? Now, you don't want to sit there in silence for 2 minutes. It's going to get real awkward pretty quick. But yeah, just take a 10-second breather. We say this to our consultants all the time as well, right? If you've got a client that's really frazzling you, just take a 10-second break. Okay. Take me through that again. Or you can, what I sometimes ask people to do is, okay, yeah, talk me through that again. I've missed a few points there. But what I'm really asking them to do is give me time to think. Give me time to process that a little bit more. Talking about the never disagreeing bit, right? Like I'll always try to think about, where's this person coming from with this? Is it they having a knee-jerk reaction? And so it's passed on to me. Sometimes like senior leaders, they might have a meeting with their leader or whatever the case is, and they've just got a reaming. And now they want to pass that down the line because they think you're at fault or whatever the case is. So trying to understand where they're coming from emotionally, go, okay, yeah, I get that. You're under pressure for this. Talk me through, how do you think I'm involved in that picture though, or whatever the case is. But yeah, I think just taking a breather is really important.
I think you're right. It's probably one of the more important things. I always say that, especially when it comes to like Slack messages or emails, like if someone messages me something I really might not like it, I always write 2 drafts. The first draft is for me. And I just say what I'm like, blah, 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 and then I'll delete it. And then I'll start again as per my last email, actually. And I think it's one of those things that sometimes you just have to take that bit of time just to let that steam pour out of your ears like a cartoon, like picturing like Yosemite Sam going bright red and steam coming out of his ears. I think you need to give yourself that little bit of time. And I think taking a pause is really underrated. If it's a one-on-one conversation where in person, take a 3, 4, 5-second pause. It feels like a lifetime, but actually isn't that long. Like a pause that long, it doesn't. Like, the person won't even really notice that you're taking a pause to think.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I always try to do, if it is something, I think you touched on it a little as well, someone said something, done something, like in a team meeting, someone's doing something really annoying, take that little bit of time, but I'm always questioning. I never come in with an answer, I come in with a question. So like, why are you doing that? You know what I mean? Like if someone tells you they're doing something all the time on calls, okay, what's the thought process there? And in my head, I'm raging, but you just got to let it
Yeah.
don't present that out.
Yeah.
Just ask the question, get them to talk. And I think it's much like your standard coaching sessions in that instance, right? Like
Mm.
you need them to
Mm.
realize why what they're doing is wrong. You telling them, and as much as your brain is wanting you to scream at them and be like, this is stupid, why are you doing that? It's not the thing you're supposed to be doing.
Mm.
I think it's much easier just to ask questions. I remember a little while ago, I caught someone flicking into aftercall to avoid calls. And they were doing it so much that they got caught. Says all the time. I don't say this to my consultants, but if you're going to be naughty, don't do it that much. You get caught. Don't be stupid. Like once or twice here, you can get away with it. But when you're doing it so much that the average person's taking 40 calls a day and you're taking 15, you're going to get noticed. And it's one of those things. I got video evidence of it. I got the whole lot. And you want to go in and just be like, what do you think you're doing? I know you're doing this, blah, blah, blah. I just don't think it's that powerful. Even though I got this full head of steam, it was much more powerful just being like, hey, so what's going on here? Why are we doing that? What do you think the repercussions of that are? And as much as I want to give the answers, fight for your life, don't give them.
Here's our t-shirt catchphrase for this episode is you can only ever win an argument through questions. You can only ever win an argument through questions. So I would love to see, like right now we're at a presidential race for the US, right? Imagine that Kamala and Trump go up on stage and instead of Kamala or whoever Trump reacting to whatever the other person's saying, just go, oh, okay, yeah, talk me through that a bit more. What do you mean by that? I think eventually they will probably tie their own noose, right? Like it's just weird. Like
you are right.
If you've got a person, 100%. If a person's talking absolute BS and they're talking BS, you just ask them enough questions and the BS becomes very evident pretty quickly.
Falls apart like house cards.
100%. So your only way to win an argument is through questions. That's going to go on a Disrupt t-shirt one day.
I actually really like that catchphrase, and I think it is really accurate. And I'm not saying that if you're listening, you should do that when you're arguing with your partner. I'm not. But all I'm saying is it will work.
Yeah, but when I do that with my wife, she goes, "Oh, I argue with you, which is like arguing with a lawyer," because I just be like, "What? Tell me how that makes sense. What about this though?" And then I keep asking questions, and eventually she's like, "I can't remember everything." And then, but one thing you learn as a husband is you're never right anyway, so you might
100%.
as well.
Happy wife, happy life, and all that. As much as times are changing, I think that's still 100% true. You know what I mean?
So, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but no, I think
for sure.
If we're going to summarize our conversation, I think the first things first is just making sure that you're really tailoring the feedback you're giving to the person you're giving to. And the key way to do that is just ask a lot of questions of that person, how do they like feedback, make sure you go into their style. And then when you are providing the feedback, as always, as with the coaching session, after everything, you will get far further by asking questions, getting them to come up with their answers. Even if you nailed on know the answers, sometimes there'll be situations where it's not going to apply. You'll have that person, you'll play the call, and you'll be like, how do you think that was? Oh, it was amazing. I loved it. I absolutely crushed it. You're going to have that. Sometimes you do have to lead the horse to water, unfortunately. But more often than not, you will get further by asking questions, I think. I think they're probably the two key takeaways from me from this session is find out how you people like feedback.
Yeah. The other with that last thing really quickly with the people that are delusional and can't see that perspective, I will still argue that what you can do is you can make an analogy to make them see that point of view. Right? I'm a big analogies guy, so I'll be like, take it out of a work context. Like we've spoken about this before, and you might say, okay, imagine this happened in your personal life, and you try to build a scenario where this would happen in their personal life, and then ask them the same question they might see very differently. Like people sometimes can't get out of their own heads when they're talking to customers or they're talking to people in a corporate environment because they see it in a certain way. But some of these conversations we have in a corporate environment, if you have it in our personal life, you look like an absolute idiot, right?
Oh, dude.
And I think it's about removing them out of that context and putting them into another context, and they will sometimes see that, hey, actually, wait a minute, me just going to a customer, what do you want? Is probably not a great thing.
You know what I like on that one, actually, related to the analogy? If that was your grandma who'd called up and the consultant was speaking to her like that, if your grandma called AGL, whoever you electrics with, and the consultant spoke like that, how would you feel about that? Oh, yeah, probably not very good. Correct. Treat every client like it's your grandma and see how far you get. You know what I mean? Like, being honest. I think that's about all we've got time for today. I think that is our episode. 100%. As always, if you've enjoyed stuff today, please do drop us a subscribe or follow. It helps us out an absolute ton. And as always, if there's anything you think was missed, anything you want to add, discuss, flesh out, please do drop a comment. It helps the channel out a ton. And eventually we'll be able to get these t-shirts going. So if that's not a reason to do it, I don't know what is. You know what I'm saying?
I know. Yeah, for 100%.